Thanks very much for joining us. Welcome back once again to Kevin Pollak's Chat Show. I am, as always, say it with me, you're not buffering. I have just whisked in via Uber from Los Angeles International Airport, otherwise known as LAX. Yeah. Because last night I did a private engagement, I guess you would call it, for the JCC's 60th anniversary of the Phoenix, Arizona. Those of you not familiar with these particular initials in this order, and it would be the Jewish Community Center. Yeah. If I told you how much these old Jews paid me, you would know. They were lovely and delightful, and hey, I hadn't seen this many Jews in the desert, and the joke. I actually did open with the last time I saw this many Jews in the desert. It did not go this well.
He said the whole thing didn't really go that well.
The whole thing didn't really go well. In my book, if you don't have yourself a copy yet, How I Slept My Way to the Middle, I tell stories about private gigs and corporate gigs, and I ask a lot of funny people in the documentary that we did, Misery Loves Comedy, that we're editing now.
I feel like Greg Proops had a lot of good stories about the corporate gigs.
About corporate gigs. It's just it's a given and a guarantee. Mm-hmm. The higher you get paid, the more horrible it will get. Because they're not a paid audience. They were not there by choice. And in this case, you know, I was in the program. I was advertised. They should have known. And then all the 40-somethings, the kids, came up after the show and said what an amazing time they had and how funny I was. Whereas the 78% of the audience, which was, let's just say, older than mid-40s, just seemed to be running reruns of Golden Girls in their mind while I was talking. There was a kid, it was actually a kid, in his mid-20s sitting up front with his back to me, because they were at round tables.
Oh, yeah.
And he had his back to me. And, you know, I'd like to think I'm a pro, but 7 minutes in.
I would assume that most people at other round tables, they turn their chairs around, no?
Oh, they all did.
Except this one.
Except for this kid. So 7 minutes in.
Maybe he's not a fan of house arrest.
I stepped aside from my professionalism, assuming he was not a fan of house arrest, and said, some of these jokes might make sense if you're actually looking. And he was very pissed off. I'm guessing the embarrassed thing worked. But here's the good news. A couple of days ago, via Twitter, I find out that this last Thursday's episode of Parks and Recreation had a little surprise in store for me. Spoiler alert, if you've not seen the Halloween episode that aired late, way after Halloween, of the Parks and Recreation. I guess they had a 2-week hiatus to give away for some other new show. That's going to bump me.
I learned that because Nick Offerman was on Opie and Anthony talking about that.
That's right.
Man.
I heard that as well.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get to a minute why Jamie sits alone today. Okay, spoiler, teaser, Sam's been fired. So, yeah, this happened on Parks and Rec this last Thursday, now available. I
was able to make it to the committee meeting on time. What's your excuse?
I was voting for you in the recall election. Lots of people wearing Leslie no buttons.
La 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 la. No discussion about the recall election until the polls close at 8. Let's focus on what we can control. In 24 hours, we are going to transform City Hall into the best haunted house Pawnee has ever seen.
There's been a mistake. This says that I'm in charge of the silly skeleton room, when really it should say the undead serial killer room. Who do I talk to about changing this?
It's recall day. I've made my case, and the latest polls have it as a dead heat, so there's nothing left to do but wait. But I'm fine. I mean, I've got stuff to do. I'm planning a haunted house. Plus, it's Kevin Pollak's birthday. That's something to focus on today. Who cares about the recall? It's Kevin's day.
How fucking sick is that? Dr. Chen, imagine. And as Jamie quickly pointed out, they had other choices if they were going to go to a birthday on the night before Halloween.
Well, they couldn't go with Henry Winkler because Henry Winkler plays Jean Ralphio and Mona Lisa's dad.
Right.
So that's why they couldn't use Henry
Barry
Winkler.
Hamlin had a hell of a year from Mad Men. Could have gone with him.
But,
Bruce Gordon, dead.
But no, Henry Winkler's actually a character on that. He's the Rashida Jones and Rob Lowe's doctor
Oh,
this
that's
season
right.
because they're having a baby.
Yeah, of course they are. Well, there you go. Now it makes sense, finally.
So that's why they went to you. So you're second best.
Well, listen. Sorry, Barry Hamlin. Pablo Picasso, also. Nothing. Not funny to say it's Pablo Picasso's birthday. So I don't know if it was the writer or if it was improvised. Because according to Nick and a few other, who else has been on here from there? Is it just Nick? Can't be.
Offerman?
Yeah.
Well, Megan Mullally, but she's just, she just plays like she's only been a handful of episodes. Oh, and John Ralphio, Ben Schwartz.
fuck's sake.
Ben Schwartz.
Yeah.
And Manzukis, was in a couple, he was only in a couple episodes. And Nick Kroll was in a couple episodes. Paul Rudd.
You can't hold Manzukis in one place for too long. Worlds collide. Anyways, thanks to the writer of the episode, whose name I'll type in later so that you can enjoy it. I retweeted the hell out of her, of course, and thanked her. But she's yet to respond as to whether it was her line or improvised. Let's see, we got the holidays coming up. The holidays. We got the Thanksgiving and Hanukkah the same night for the first time in history. There I said it. The Maccabees may disagree. If so, please write to us at contact@kevinpollakschatcho.com. What are you doing for Thanksgiving? Write to us, contact@kevinpollakschatcho.com. Let us know, won't you? Also, damn it, subscribe to us on the YouTube and the iTunes. Would it kill you to write a review if you care at all about what we're doing here? Which apparently I get emails saying you do. Then damn it, lend a hand, won't you? I'm very excited about today's guest. I don't know how much more, James, is there anything else you want to cover? Jim Fox.
No, I mocked you. That was all I really wanted to do.
I guess, Sam, I should let everyone know. He was on Twitter complaining this morning.
Was he back east?
The quote was, I had to get up at the taint of the morning tomorrow to go to work. And then he quoted, hashtag 415. And then I retweeted it adding, complaining about work? Are you, Sammy?
The taint is also how Lost ended, I believe, right? It was all Hurley's taint. No? That was my, I've never watched an episode. I don't know, that was just always my gag whenever everyone was off.
Yes.
Sorry.
I didn't want to have the fourth spoiler alert of the day of the show, but yes, it was all on Hurley's taint. Jorge.
I thought it was fun. I'm not as clever as I think I am. I'm sorry.
Oh no! I think if you go right to the chat room right now, you'll find that you are in fact exactly as clever as you think you are. And given the uber low level of self-esteem that we all know you have, you see where it matches.
As I was driving here today, I came up with a funny joke, and then it turns out I guess it wasn't that original. But I was driving here, and there was a plastic bag that came across my windshield, and I was like, "Get out of my way, American Beauty!"
See? Come on.
I thought, and I was cracking. I was like, "Ha ha ha!" About myself, like I'm so clever. And I came in and told people the joke, and they're like,
Yeah, Family Guy did it. Is that what they said?
"I know."
So yeah, Sammy's in New York. No one knows what he's doing there. I mean, someone does. So Sammy, I know you're watching right now with your family because they watch every Sunday.
Harris, Lynn, and Max.
Harris, Lynn, and Max, and now Sam, all gathered at the home in New Jersey. We're missing you horribly. Let us know. Write to us. Text J-Mac, Jamie in the other room, and let us know what it is you're working on so we can talk about it, won't you? Or is it something we can't talk about? We're especially missing you today because my guest is right up your alley. I first met him briefly at the 2012 World Series of Poker main event. As I was on my way to a hell of a deep run, as they say. I don't remember the exact place. I finished 134 out of 6,598, but it was somewhere in that exact vicinity. He was there continuing his research on his book, which has not come out yet. We'll find out some release dates in a few moments. But I got wind of this book, and then I ran into him again this year at the main event, where I did not finish as well. But thank you, Hollywood Poker, for sponsoring me once again. I think we got Jack Black on the team for next year, and Kyle Gass. Very excited.
I did not know about Kyle. I knew that Jack was interested this year.
We're going to have the entire Tenacious D, the entire duo. So here he is. Please welcome, and I don't want to mess up your name, Leighton. James Leighton.
Right.
James Leighton. All right. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me on.
The research shows that you're not a first-time author, so give us a little bit of background, if you would. This is your, all I could find said it was your second,
It's actually my fifth.
but of course it's your fifth.
Yeah.
So tell us about your previous efforts, if you would. Let's start there.
The previous books were all actually soccer books. The first three books you probably would never have heard of the sports stars involved, let alone the team. I'm a Cardiff City fan. That's my local soccer team back home.
That was the one that I was actually looking at. And is there a chance that that's the reason we're not as familiar with these books here in the United States of America?
Probably, yeah. I don't think anyone really wants to read about Fred Keener and Cardiff City Football Club out here. Not yet, anyway.
We just lost 7,000 viewers just now by you mentioning those names.
Yeah, I'll try and move on from that pretty quickly then.
But they factor into this new book, actually. A couple, not them, but a couple rugby players or ballers. He runs into one of them, an ex-star. Well, we'll talk about it when we get to that point, telling the story.
Running through the book in my head now.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, no, the first three books were all Cardiff City soccer star books back home. Then I wrote a book about a Manchester United soccer star called Duncan Edwards,
Right.
who was one of the greatest players in the world in the 1950s, when Manchester United, one of the best teams in the world, and he tragically died at the age of 21 in the Munich air disaster. So it's just a horrible, horrible book, really tough to write. And that came out about 2 years ago. And
How did that do?
that was actually the #1 sports book in the UK when it came out, which was fantastic.
Congratulations.
No, it was fantastic. It's what you dream of when you start writing these books, is to hit #1. But obviously those type of books, football books, only sell well in the UK. I mean, no one in America or elsewhere really cares about soccer books, or Manchester United. Maybe Manchester United they do. So I was kind of looking for a more commercial project, something with international appeal and something which involved a bit of travelling and going to cool places like Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent a few months looking for the right story, and then there it was in the newspaper one day, this collapse of online poker and Daniel Tzvetkoff and all the crazy things that had gone on in that story. So I was pretty excited about it. I thought it'd make a great book, maybe a great movie. But I thought the story was about a year old at the time, and I was convinced someone must have been writing a book about it by that stage.
Yeah, what was the time of year that you actually saw the story originally?
It must have been...
2011 or 12?
No, it would have been 2012.
Yeah.
So it was a good year since Black Friday, and all
Right.
the news about Daniel Tzvetkoff had been out there. And I don't know why exactly the story was in the British newspaper back then, because as I said, it was a year on from the event. So I was convinced someone else would be writing the story because it was such a fantastic one. And I went to speak to my publisher about it. And bearing in mind, I've written soccer books before, so to ask to write about the rise and fall of online poker and Daniel Tzvetkoff, I knew it was a big ask.
This is an Australian publisher?
No, this is Simon & Schuster in the UK.
The Simon & Schuster.
The Simon & Schuster, yeah.
Yeah. Because I know Daniel is Australian,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So,
So first of all, I went to speak to them in the UK, and bearing in mind the book has nothing to do with the UK at all, because Daniel's Australian and it's the collapse of online poker in the US.
right.
I wasn't sure what reaction I'd get from them, but they were as excited about it as I was, and they started putting their feelers out in the industry to see if anyone else was working on it, and no one had even heard of it. There was nothing at all, not even a book on Black Friday being written, which I couldn't believe.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of documentaries, I watched one of them in preparation for this about a few poker players involving their life before Black Friday and then during the collapse.
Bet Raise Fold?
No, it was the other one. It's
This one with Matt Damon.
the original title was Boom. Maybe that is Bet Raise Fold.
I think,
Yeah, it
that's
is
Bet Raise Fold. And it was All In was the other one. That's the one Matt Damon did as
yeah,
well.
it's Bet Raise Fold.
Yeah.
And I don't even know that a lot of people are aware. I mean, the story of Black Friday for online poker became national news because this giant business, whether you were involved in it or not, was something in the news that you couldn't really escape for a little while. And I know people, for the most part, fall on two sides of the topic, which is obsession or complete and utter lack of interest.
Yeah.
So it's coming from writing about soccer, specifically the towns and stars of very small towns that have an insane, rabid, lifelong loyalty of following. You're already specializing in niche
Yes.
journalism to a point. And you know, I'm curious because it reads like a novel, it feels like a novel, and it's all, of course, based on facts, and you have this wonderful story that we're going to get to now of how these facts were uploaded, as it were, into your brain.
Yeah, I mean, when I set out to write it, I knew that if I set out to write it just to appeal to the poker community, it was going to be a very niche book, and while the poker community might enjoy it, that might be the end of it.
Yeah.
My intention was always to make it as commercial as possible, something that first and foremost the poker community would enjoy, but then also if you've never even played a hand of poker in your life, like my mother, for instance, knows nothing about poker. She probably never even picked up a pack of cards. I knew if she could read the story and enjoy it and understand a bit of online poker, then my job was done. And thankfully, I know a few people now who've read it who aren't even poker fans, but have enjoyed the story because it is written as if it was a thriller.
Had you played?
Very, very badly, yeah. Not so much online poker, only a little bit online poker. I prefer playing...
With mates?
Yeah, with mates, just because of the banter and the camaraderie you get with it. And in fact, when I was at university, we used to play like 24/7. We almost blew our degrees in the end because we were just completely obsessed. And it wasn't even for the money. We used to have a leaderboard put up, and the money was like complete peanuts. We were broke students, but it was all about getting on the top of that leaderboard and getting our little trophy. It was pathetic, really, but it was a real obsession. And I remember, like, literally the week before our final exams, we were pulling all-nighters, playing poker instead of studying, which probably reflected in our grades in the end.
Did you keep up your interest in the game as a participant over the years?
Yeah, every time, obviously when everyone finished university, everyone goes off here, there and everywhere with jobs. But a group of us back home in Cardiff, we always get to get together whenever we can and play. And again, it's all for the camaraderie and the banter. You can play for hours and just completely rip the piss out of each other, which is always good fun.
I may have a seat at my game tomorrow night, is why I asked.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, you're looking at a complete sucker here. Everyone's probably rubbing their hands together thinking, yeah, invite him to the game.
I repeat, I have a game tomorrow night. I believe a seat open. J-Mac, does still have a seat open? Yeah. Okay.
Terrible, terrible poker player.
Perfect. All right. You're cordially invited. We tried to get Richard Kind to play in the game, and the players at the table actually offered to buy him in. He said, "Oh no, I'm not going to play with your friends buying me in so that they can make fun of me while I'm there. I won't do it." So
I like that we ran into him outside of
unbelievable
at the restroom at the Grove, at the farmer's market. Because where else do you run
into him but coming out of the restroom?
I also have a message from Sam.
Oh, good. This just in.
This just in from Sam Levine. I'm not in front of a computer, but I've just been informed by Max that Kevin doesn't know why I'm in New York. I'm shooting an episode of Person of Interest. I miss you all terribly, but don't cry for me. I'm already dead.
Nice.
And then I replied, Barney's movie had heart, but football to the groin had a football to the groin. And then he responded, we did 37 takes, and that was the best one.
And for those of you watching and or listening, these two could continue Simpsons quotes until that entire episode had been read out loud.
A Star is Burns was the episode that we were
It's
quoting.
actually one of the best episodes as well.
So Senior Spielbergo, non-union Mexican equivalent.
Yeah. Thank you, Max, for relaying to Sam, and Sam, thank you for letting us know that this week, anyways, you are in fact a person of interest. See how I wrapped it all up? I almost did the British news telecast.
Down at the end.
All the stories go down at the end.
That's your old bit. That's your old act from like 10 years ago.
A train derailed in Manchester and 3 people died. Am I wrong?
Just like being back home.
My favorite was good Chevrolet and a hot dog.
Yeah, 4th of July. And our guest was telling me beforehand that some are finally coming around to celebrating a version of 4th of July.
Bizarrely back home there was
in
some
the UK?
4th of July parties back home in the UK, which is like celebrating our defeats, which is very British actually. Kind of makes sense.
It's very
We
British.
revel in our defeats.
But I would think you'd be celebrating over a pint, saying, "Yeah, fuck them.
No,
Let them have
people
it."
back home, just any excuse to get drunk really, so
Right.
yeah, we'll probably have Thanksgiving next and all sorts.
Yeah. Yeah. I was explaining to you that you're not allowed to celebrate the genocide of the Native Americans. That's something strictly that we go out of our way to. In fact, we'll have our own little orphans dinner. All right. So, tell me about. So you read the story in the paper at home. It's a year old. You check with your publisher. Shockingly, no one's followed up on this. I'll be honest, I thought I was on top of the story, and I'd never heard of this guy because he came from the high finance world and not from the front pages of any of these poker sites. You know, as Chris Ferguson and Lederer and all these guys were getting called, you know, out for
It was
crimes
amazing.
against humanity.
It was amazing following the story. Everyone was so focused on Full Tilt Poker and all those guys.
Right.
And as I was researching it, I was thinking, yeah, these guys had a part to play and they're pretty reckless, the way they run Full Tilt. But they're not the main guys involved in all this. They're not the thread of the story, really, not as far as I was concerned anyway. And
Not even close.
not even close. When you read the book, you realise actually how little part they had to play in it all.
Yeah.
And it was just incredible reading all the poker websites, and this story was just, it was mentioned here and there, but it was kind of like just stayed under the radar. And in fact, when people read the book, there's going to be some names that are going to pop out of them, which they've probably never heard of before, which actually had a major part to play in how everything went down on Black Friday.
Right. So the story really begins with he wasn't even full-time, a part-time employee at Pizza Hut
Yeah,
in, what part of
it
Australia?
was in Brisbane.
Brisbane, right. 22 years old, right?
A bit younger, yeah, but literally dropped out of school when he was 16, no qualifications, working in Pizza Hut, working on small computer business in his part-time, designing websites, driving traffic.
Right.
It's another actually really interesting story from Brisbane. He was working for a group of guys in Brisbane known as the Porn Mafia.
Yeah, the Porn Mafia. These guys were friends of his, a couple of them anyways,
Yeah.
from school and palling around and whatnot, who had struck uranium, basically, with internet porn.
They'd literally, by accident, created the world's first porn website a few years before. When they were teenagers, they were dropouts from school in Brisbane. And one of them cut some pictures out of a magazine, Playboy, Penthouse one day, and put it online. And before he realised it, he'd created the world's first porn website. And then they realised they could start charging subscription fees, they could start shooting their own videos and making their own content. And within a few years, these guys in Brisbane, early 20s, owned 75% of the world's porn, which is just a crazy story in itself. And that's how Daniel got in with these guys, because he was helping drive traffic to their porn websites in between working at Pizza Hut.
Yeah, I mean, we have a media maven on this show, Danielle Overland, fairly new to the team, and she will carve out keywords and ways to drive traffic to the show. And the year was, what would this be when Daniel was 21, 22?
I think it's going back 2002, I think.
Right.
think around
So
that
still
stage.
way ahead of the curve in terms of the actual talent it took to kind of create this job. It wasn't something people knew much about.
No, because SEO stuff has really only come into the mainstream the last few years. So
Right.
you think this guy was doing it 11 years ago. You can see just how far ahead he was.
Yeah.
And he's always, but at the stage in Brisbane, there were a few other people doing that. That was almost old news in Brisbane, SEO at the time.
Really?
So he was constantly looking for this big idea which was going to make him his fortune. And he found that in payment processing, which
Right.
again, he stumbled upon almost by accident.
Was that another update from Sam, by the way? Oh, okay. So explain, because this is such a huge part of the story that I didn't know. I mean, I was in a movie, sort of the American version, similar, Middlemen.
Yeah, great movie.
Which speaks a little bit to this area. pay sites where they need to process money through. And those guys thought they invented porn on the internet, I'm sure long after the Aussies. But give us a little background on what exactly this, brash kid stumbled across, and before he knew it was sort of not reinventing, but making his own and creating new and different ways to do it.
I think around this time, with retailers going online and selling products online,
Right.
A lot of banks didn't really want to accept money from internet businesses. They were pretty wary about them. And they were sort of coming around to it with mainstream retailers at the turn of the millennium, but businesses such as porn, gambling, pharmaceuticals, the banks wanted absolutely nothing to do with it.
Yeah, they even shied away from Amazon initially.
Yeah, exactly.
The whole idea of money coming in from the computer wasn't something that the old world banks were.
Well, they must have missed out on billions of dollars at that time. And the payment processors realised this. They could set up a business effectively acting as the middlemen between the online retailers and the banks. So if a customer was buying something online, such as a porn subscription, the porn website would pass it on to the middlemen, the payment processor, and then through various different means, or whatever way possible, they would get it into a bank account. In some cases, there's some shady banks around the world who didn't care where the money came from and they just accept it. But in a lot of cases, they had to disguise the payments. And
that was the thing that he sort of had to create his own version of, new versions of, which is how to disguise what the money looked like when it got to the bank.
Yeah.
So that it didn't say gambling site, porn site, pharmaceuticals. It said something else.
Exactly. And in some cases, he might have been processing for a legitimate business, like flowers, for instance, and he would throw in all the porn money with the flowers.
And the bank would think that is a shit ton of flowers.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's when red alerts start going off, because you think, well, florists can't be making that much money. And that's the problem then. The bank would shut down the account and the florist would lose all their money, unbeknown to them that the porn website's money was the reason it got shut down. So, and a lot of these banks as well, even the banks who were happy to process for porn, every 6 months or so there was a bank in St Kitts who would shut everyone's account down and just take all the money. And
because they knew if they refused to take this money from the porn sites or whatnot, they could still somehow hold on to it and say, screw you, or...
Well, who are they going to go cry to? They can't go to the police, and they haven't got any other choices. So what would happen, it was laughed about in the industry. Yeah, St Kitts has gone down again. They've taken all our money. They'll be up and running again next week, and you put all the business their way again. It's like an occupational hazard. It's absolutely crazy that banks were effective. Well, it's not crazy because we all know it happens in the real world anyway. But banks were effectively just stealing the money.
Yeah, so that's maybe the follow-up book.
Yeah,
is the people who were running the banks that figured the game out ahead of everyone else and said, if we just let the money come in for 10 weeks, every 10 weeks or so, we can just shut these idiots down and there ain't shit they can do.
It reminds me of when I was younger, trying to get into a nightclub and blagging my way in with a fake ID. And literally the bouncer would let you go to the bar and order a drink, and you'd just be about to sip your drink, and then they drag you out because they've had your payment to get in, they've had your drink money, and then they kick you out.
Yeah, when I was 18 years old, myself and a group of 5 other guys, fresh out of high school, one of us parents had a summer home or a vacation home in Lake Tahoe. One of the locations for Godfather 2, for those of you around the country and world trying to figure out where the hell Lake Tahoe is. So we got to stay for free, and we all had to get jobs. And we all got jobs at the same horrible little box of a casino restaurant, the Nugget. And it was a little tiny, tiny, tiny place, the smallest by far. And we all worked the same shift, a couple of busboys, a couple of kitchen guys. And every week we got a paycheck. And we were 18 years old, and the gambling restriction minimum is 21 years old. But one of us had the nerve to go into the gambling area and play some blackjack. And cashed his check and started playing some blackjack. And then the rest of us thought, well, if he can do it, why can't we do it? Next thing we know, we're all in there on payday. They're letting us drink. They're letting us gamble. What do you suppose happened at the end of that round? We went home with no money. All 6 of us.
Familiar tale.
We were drunk and fed, but we certainly didn't have any money. It was astonishing. We thought we were getting one over on them, is my point. And here it is, these banks in St. Kitts and what have you were the ones holding all the...
Yeah, and Daniel also came up with a way. There were a lot of other payment processors in the world at the time.
Sure.
And his little niche was having this fraud prevention system, because the worst thing that could happen was if you had chargebacks on your account, which is basically a customer ringing up the bank and saying, because they had to disguise the payment, so
Right.
on the customer's bank statement, if they subscribed to porn, it would come up as flowers. So the customer would look at their bank statement and say, I didn't order flowers. And they'd
Right.
ring the bank, complain, and the bank would say, oh, sorry, and they refund the account. If too many people did that, then the bank would shut down the whole account and freeze the money. So Daniel came up with a way of, seems pretty simple, but no one was doing it at the time. He would tell the customer beforehand, hey, I know you've ordered porn, but on your bank statement it's going to say you bought flowers. And there were loads of various...
Doing them a solid, by the way.
Yeah, pretty much.
Should
yeah.
they be married or in any kind of relationship? Hey, knucklehead, we put it down as flowers.
That was pretty much what he did. And he also came up with various other technologies, such as dealing with stolen credit cards. If people were using stolen credit cards to subscribe to porn, which apparently millions of people were doing, he worked out a way of finding out how the credit cards, if they were stolen, or he would limit that credit card to one transaction per
Right.
day. So it would kind of stop banks blowing up and it really cut down on chargebacks. So all of a sudden he's this guy working in Pizza Hut who stumbled across the payment processing world, and he's got this niche technology which can cut down on chargebacks. But the only problem is he doesn't really know how to sell it. So for the first year or so, he's going out there and he's got a few clients in the porn world, but he's not really making any money, and he looks like he's going to crash out and have to go back to Pizza Hut full time. And that's when he stumbles across a guy called Sam Shacker, who was his lawyer, and he realised that if he dealt with the technology side of things and Sam dealt with the business development, then it could be a partnership made in heaven. And for a time it was, because they got together and they just became phenomenally successful over a very
And
short
Daniel, at
period
this
of time.
point, is 23.
Yeah,
Right.
23.
Ridiculously.
Still living at home.
Sure. Still living at home.
Still living at home, just left Pizza Hut, no qualifications. And within no time at all, he's virtually got almost every penny of online poker in America going through his bank account, which you think, this completely unregulated industry, a guy with no qualifications, and he's got all this money coming in his bank account at the age of 23.
What kind of numbers are we talking about at that point?
I think at the peak, in terms of profit,
Because, after 2003, the Chris Moneymaker
it's
effect,
exploded.
it all changed.
Yes.
It blew up because everyone thought they could do it. It was like the lottery, and everyone wanted a piece. So what are the numbers that are going through Daniel's account at that point? Is there any way to...
We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right. And he gets to hold on to a tiniest of percentage?
He takes 7% out of every dollar, and then they also keep, in the poker world, he was keeping, I think, 10% on account as well, in case if a bank shut down and they levied a fine, that 10% would pay the fine.
So 10 million is held on accounts of 100 million.
Yeah.
And the 7 million is just profit.
Yeah, and he's also dealing with the float, he's actually, his company, not the poker companies, is paying the players' wins and losses. So he's keeping on to all that cash. And the contracts with the poker companies were pretty shoddy. All they said was, you have to repay us this money at this date. It didn't say anything about you had to keep the money on trust, or you couldn't do this with it, you couldn't do that with it.
No escrow account?
Nothing. It was crazy. I was looking at the contracts. I just couldn't believe it. I just could not believe that these contracts were signed. It effectively let this 23-year-old kid do what he wanted with that money, as long as he could pay it back
Right.
at the certain date. So with all this money in the accounts, he obviously thinks, well, if we can invest it here, there, and everywhere, we can make even more money. We're making 7% on the dollar as it is. We could make a lot more. So initially, he starts going out and investing, putting it in high-interest bank accounts or buying shares and treating himself along the way. I think the book's pretty clear of some of the things he bought for himself.
He really was record-setting pace of consumerism based on this sudden explosion of cash flow. I mean, it's astounding. I mean, we've all seen the rags to riches. We've all seen the story of whether it's Scarface, rising from peasant to multi-millionaire, and the lavish riches one pours upon one. And you just smell the downside coming. As soon as Tony Montana sits in the giant bathtub soaking the size of a house, you know, well, he's going to be dead in 36 minutes.
Well, that's the thing. Daniel was obsessed with things like Scarface. He loved Entourage. And in fact, when I was researching the book, you'd hear things that Daniel had done, and you think, haven't I seen that? Vinny Chase do that in Entourage? And you soon realise he was literally trying to emulate Vinny Chase.
Yeah.
And, you know, he went out, he's 23, 24 years old, earning $3 million profit a week at one stage.
$3 million a week, 23.
Not bad. And he bought a $30 million house on the Gold Coast. I think the final count of cars was 20, like Ferraris, Lamborghinis.
Not just any $30 million house, the single most expensive house in the single most desirable beach
It was like
in
buying
all of Australia.
Yeah, it was like buying the best house in Beverly Hills, basically. And this 23-year-old kid who no one knew who he was.
Right.
And obviously, as soon as you do that, it's meant to be kept low profile, all of this. But as soon as you buy a house on that street, then everyone's going to want to know who you are.
Yeah.
And
Well, let's stop for a moment and tell me about what we started to touch on, which is how this information comes to you. Because very little is in the news story you read in the paper.
yeah,
And so your research takes you to a place where, after the fact, who opens the door and the vault of all this information for you?
it was tough because I'm someone who's not involved in the online poker world at all. Obviously, don't live in Australia either, so I've got no contact to any of the parties. So it was a real thrill to sign the contract to write the book. It was like great, and then it dawned on me, oh shit, how am I actually going to get to the bottom of this if I don't know anyone? If people are going to speak? Because at the time, the court cases were still ongoing. Daniel was in witness protection. There's a lot of anger in the community as well. So you're just thinking, oh, this is going to be tough. So I literally just packed my bags and made my way out to Australia. And I just bombarded, just literally harassed people and ground them down to speak to me. I can't reveal any of the names because they've asked to be kept confidential because obviously it's such a volatile subject.
Sure.
But you know, I managed to track down most of the major players in the book, explained what I wanted to do, and even though they were pretty wary to begin with, we built up trust between us, and slowly but surely it started unloading information on me, whether it was hours and hours of interviews, which was great, but the key was getting hold of all the emails,
Yeah.
court documents, contracts, photographs, affidavits, because you've soon realised you could speak to loads of different people, which is great, but everyone, either they had a different viewpoint on what happened, or you'd soon find out that some people were basically lying, like literally lying to your face about what had occurred, or they'd send you documents saying, oh, this email shows how this happened, and then you'd have the same email from another source, and the wording had been changed. So people were just trying to get you off the scent all the time. So it was a
Yeah, it
real
seemed like they
battle.
were using you to make their case ultimately to a larger court and defending themselves to you through your book.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And thankfully, I trained as a lawyer before I did this, so I kind of used to dealing with these type of situations and going through mountains of court documents and trying to figure out what the real story is. And as you start breaking everything down and figuring it all out, you realise that the stuff that had been in the press had been spun in a certain way. And I mean, Daniel was a complete hate figure in the poker world, completely hated, death threats and all the rest of it. But then you soon start unravelling the story and speaking to people who were closely involved. And you realise, yeah, this guy was out of control and he played a part, but he wasn't the main reason this all went down. He played a big part in it all, but there's a lot of other people who had stayed under the radar who also had their fair share in what went down.
Oh, completely. So did you in fact become a solicitor then?
I did, yes.
You did?
Solicitor, yeah. For 3 long years.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you have a specific area of expertise?
Litigation.
Really?
2 years, which is perfect for something like this.
Yeah, exactly.
At the time when you quit being a lawyer and you go into being a writer, you think, oh, was that a waste of time? But in fact, it was the best grounding ever to write a book like this. I couldn't have written this book if I hadn't had a legal background.
Yeah. And you said some of your friends are going to be tuning into the show, not necessarily to hear your stories that they've already heard, but to hear some impressions?
Oh yeah, they're sick of me speaking about Alligator Blood now. They said, oh, we don't want to hear about the book anymore. Just get Kevin to do some impressions. So I know my friend, if he's watching, Ben Morris back home, is desperate for the Christopher Walken impression.
All right, well, first of all, in your face. What's your friend's name?
Ben.
Ben, you son of a bitch. Look, it's the book. We got an Amazon page also that we can pop up there on the screen to show the book in all of its glory. Pre-order. It doesn't come out in the States till...
We're still waiting on a release date, actually.
There it is. You can pre-order it.
There we go.
And then you can send it to us. We'll send it to James. He'll sign it. And $47 later, you'll have a copy.
Yeah, that's the situation at the moment.
And as for your friend Ben, maybe you should go back to iTunes and look for Talkin' Walkin', my other podcast, you son of a bitch. Get yourself all the walking you can handle. We do have a couple of questions coming in live to the chat room. Thank you, Jamie. This first one may have been shuffled over from the Facebook. Eric Suchi or Suki Dal. There's 3 names there. How often do you get asked for writing tips by young writers?
I get it all the time, actually. That's the great thing about Twitter. You get a real writing community on there, and everyone seems really happy to share tips. I get private messages all the time asking, how did you get an agent? How did you get a publisher? Even to how many words a day do you try and set yourself to write? Because when you're self-employed, you've got to be very disciplined. It'd be quite easy to sit at home and put on Breaking Bad and spend the whole day watching that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, all the time. And I ask other writers tips as well, because it's quite a lonely job sometimes being a writer, especially when you live in Cardiff. There's not many other writers around you can bounce ideas off. So, that's what Twitter's fantastic for.
Do you write just in a Starbucks then?
No. Not like out here. Every time I go into Starbucks, everyone's on their laptops.
Well, it's the only
away.
place you're allowed to write.
Yeah, I think that must be the law out here.
Yeah. I've now come to the point where I'm standing and adding my artificial sweetener. I'll turn to the bank of writers and say, how's my part? That's where I go for work now.
It is astonishing. I was in Starbucks the other day, and literally everyone was on laptops, and you could just see his final draft was up on most of them. It was unbelievable. But no, back home, there's nothing like that back home. I think I'd get laughed out of Starbucks if I started trying to be a writer in Starbucks in Cardiff. I'd have to keep to myself in my bedroom, just in my shorts and T-shirts, and try and pound out about 3,000 words a day.
Well, maybe Eric is looking for some advice.
Yeah, well, if he wants to tweet me or get in touch with yourself, then
we've been
go
putting
for
it
it.
on the screen, but it is James L 1927. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
At James L 1927. Also, the year of the birth of, is it 25 or 27? 25, I think. Paris, 1925. Place and birth of Art Deco. Correct.
Of course I knew that.
Not the trend or the
I just know that
fashion.
1928 is when Mickey Mouse was created.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, good knowledge. But what was 1927? Why is that in my Twitter handle?
Yeah, why is
Put
that
you
your
on the
Twitter
spot.
handle?
It's pathetic, really. It's the year.
Soccer?
Yeah, Cardiff City won the FA Cup. It's pathetic. Yeah.
Not pathetic at all. Just made your mates very pleased. And again, we lost 7,000.
Yeah. I'll stop talking about soccer.
No, don't. We had Drew Carey here. He wouldn't shut up about it. Okay, we have another one here from at Scott Schaller. Is there anything about Tzvetkoff, Daniel Tzvetkoff, that you can tell us that you did not write in the book? Well, the easy answer is yes. There must be a reason you didn't write about it in the book. I had a story from the set of The Usual Suspects that I realized I couldn't tell, but I did make a point of saying, there's a story that's missing from a favorite movie of yours. If you get me, enough drinks in me at a bar sometime, I'll tell you the story. And it came up again last night, and I was forced to tell a handful of 40-something Jews.
So can you tell us now? It's not something for the year.
Nope.
I'll ask you when we're off air now. I'm intrigued.
I'll be happy to tell you when the camera's not rolling. But are there, in fact, there must be
yeah, there
some
are.
things the publisher said, maybe we don't mention this part.
Not so much that, actually. Most of it's in there, to be honest.
Most of it, you said.
Most of it is in there. I'm just trying to think. Daniel, when he left school, he wanted to be an animator, and he actually went to animation classes. And this is
Speaking of 1928.
Yeah, there we go.
And Mickey.
That's the link. Thank you. You saved me there, actually, by mentioning Mickey Mouse, because that's what brought that in. And I'm not sure if this is true or not. I could never get to the bottom of this story. Apparently, he was designing cartoons for the website of the New York Times, and before he got paid, 9/11 happened, and the people he was working with the New York Times, there's some sort of link, died on 9/11. And while that sounds like an incredible story, I could never get to the bottom whether it was true or not. I contacted the New York Times, and they didn't really want to have any link with Daniel Tzvetkoff, unsurprisingly.
Yeah.
So, and no one in Australia could kind of really shed any light or provide concrete evidence on it. But if I could have got that verified, it would have gone in the book. But as I said, I only put things in the book which were completely signed off. And
Well, that's just the other thing we were talking about, getting back to now. As a solicitor, you do have to figure out and at some point trust your gut.
yeah,
I mean, are you thrice getting confirmation on bits of information? Or at some point, to keep the train moving forward, do you just have to connect these dots as they make sense of information? And because, you know, the emails, how many thousands of emails did you ultimately get?
oh, tens of thousands. It's wading through a huge wads of paper.
I mean, not even Obama's office can get through most of that sort of stack of emails, as hard as they try. So how? I mean, what, are you working alone? Do you have
Yeah, that's the thing.
a bank of chimps working around
I
the
wish.
clock trying to write the world's greatest novel?
I wish.
Blurst of times?
It was the best of times. It was the blurst of times.
I actually was by myself, and I had 9 months to do it. So I had literally 9 months to research a story from scratch and to write it and make it as entertaining as possible. So it was tough, and it was literally 24/7. Got a lot more grey hairs and a lot more wrinkles than when I started writing the book, because it was just a crazy, crazy schedule. And
Are you able to reach Daniel? What are your efforts to reach Daniel?
I can't go in and out into too much detail on with Daniel, but
When you start writing, he's already in witness protection?
yeah, that's the problem.
That's the rub, isn't it?
Yeah, it's always difficult to get in touch with someone in witness protection and say, hey, I want to write a book about your life.
Unless it's Steve Martin's character in witness protection, and then it becomes easy.
My Blue Heaven?
My Blue Heaven.
Yes.
Yeah. Ugarugula. It's a vegetable. So you can't tell us whether, in fact, you were in constant contact.
There was various points of contact with lawyers and people connected to Daniel.
And is the word coming back to you that he's happy that this book is being written, that he's relieved, that he's now in more?
I think what's been good about this book, hopefully for Daniel, maybe he might think differently, but before this book came out, all you saw about Daniel was negative press, really, really negative press. And some of the reviews I've seen lately have actually said that when people read the book, yes, he was reckless and did some crazy things, but actually sympathise with him at the end, and you kind of understand a lot of his decision making, which happens throughout the book. So I just hope that it gives a bit more, it rounds off the story a bit more, rather than Daniel was the out and out bad guy. And hopefully it's probably the first time he's received positive press since Black Friday because of this book. And
Yeah, I mean, the general consensus from the story that maybe you read in the paper initially, and those in the poker chat rooms that were holding him up in effigy, was that the government was finally able to build a case of money laundering and blah, 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 and shut down all American poker websites or any American money going into a poker website because of information that he gave them. And the idea that your book, I thought, did a tremendous job at shedding not only light on his personal story and how he couldn't possibly be to blame. It is the people that the government brought the case against who are actually, in fact, to blame. They use information that they got from Daniel, but he wasn't the only source of that
no,
information.
not at all.
Right.
And that's what the press had done.
Right.
The press had just basically
Singled him out.
Singled him out.
Yeah.
And
that must have been fun for him.
yeah, and plus he's in witness protection, so he can't defend himself.
Right.
So he was just taking the brunt of it all at the time. So that this is why Black Friday happened. It's all because of this guy. And look, he was an easy target, a young kid spending millions of dollars on private jets and parties with Mike Tyson and all the rest of it. So
Oh, we've all partied with Mike Tyson at some point, haven't we, Ken? Isn't that your plan for Vegas on Thanksgiving?
Correct.
Gonna hang with Tyson and the Tiger? Yeah. Yeah. Again, I really want to stress the height and length that this kid found himself in, which is one of the reasons the book becomes such a page turner and so well written. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Honestly and truly, is, you know, it's one thing for a brash kid to stumble across, in some cases over his own mistakes, lightning in a bottle and winning the lottery, and sure, some of it from his own creativity and his own version of genius in terms of finding a new way to
definitely was
money
genius.
process. Yeah, but to rise to the level, literally a historic level, it wasn't just, oh my goodness, I've come into 100 million, because we've all seen that. To buy, again, the most expensive house on the most sought-after beachfront in all of Australia, it's just absurd. And the news, as you point out, had a bit of a field day with who is this guy? Where the hell did this money come from? Because he was not coming forward in any of the, there didn't seem to be any press. He wasn't a guy who was going out of his way to say, here I am, to his countrymen. Because in his mind, he was running a business that wasn't completely on the up and up?
I think he kind of enjoyed the spotlight in a certain respect, but the problem with the industry he's working in is it's quite, not a shady industry, but you want to keep it, especially US gambling in America at the time, it was a grey area. No one in the US is really sure if online poker was legal or not legal. So the last thing you want to do is put your hand out there and say, hey, I'm processing all the money in online poker in America. And the poker companies and everyone connected to that world was well aware that, let's just try and keep this on the down low. Don't stir at the hornet's nest.
Right.
And then next thing, Daniel buys this mega mansion, the most expensive home in Australia, and all of a sudden the press, like, who is this kid?
A 98-foot yacht and the Lamborghini. What do we think the number is at its peak in just terms of gross between him and his partner, lawyer?
I think within 18 months, the company was close to being valued at $1 billion in 18 months. I think it could have been anywhere up to $500 million.
Between $500 million and $1 billion.
Yeah.
Now, we talking euros now? Because that's already, I guess the euros weren't a thing yet. On the timeline, of course they were. Yeah, of course they were. So
just dollars.
It is dollars.
US dollars.
Oh, right, because of course all this money is coming ultimately from the US.
And it's not just the poker money, they've also got a big chunk of pharmaceuticals, which you see in the book,
Right.
and porn. And they were just becoming this huge, they're just devouring the whole payment processing industry. And before it all collapsed, they were all plans were in place to buy banks and to float, and they were going to be worth billions.
Yeah. Yeah, and what makes him a sympathetic figure is he's done in by someone that he and his lawyer partner had sort of knighted to run one of the U.S. companies, and that person found out a way to just cut them, Daniel and his partner, out. And if the poker site guys had just hung in literally weeks more, it could have been the turn of. I mean, it really is an extraordinary ride.
Yeah, when he had all this money at his disposal, as I said earlier, he wanted to invest it, and they were contacted by a business in Las Vegas about investing to a payday loan operation where they could triple their money in 3 years. So they met up with a guy called Curtis Pope to run a company called Transact. They'd invest $30 million. Within 3 years, it'd be $100 million. And obviously this was Interbill's money they were investing, and it's poker players' money, so they needed access to it whenever they asked for it. And Curtis and Daniel quickly became the best of friends in Las Vegas. Sam Shacker stayed in Brisbane, Daniel and Curtis got together in Vegas, and they just had a crazy time together. They were buying each other Ferraris and Rolexes, and Curtis Pope, from everyone I've spoken to, was a fun-loving, crazy guy, always a centre of attention, very flash.
Currently incarcerated, Curtis Pope?
He is out now. I believe he was released in March.
Aha.
And along the way then, there's some disagreements about how to run the company, And Curtis also isn't a fan of how much money Daniel is spending. And I think along the way he realises that he could take the company from Daniel with all his clients and all the money at the same time, and cut Daniel, the middleman, completely out of it. So I think Curtis Pope saw that opportunity and took it. So all of a sudden, literally overnight, Daniel has gone from having all these huge poker companies as his clients, hundreds of millions of dollars at his disposal, all the toys you could wish for. Literally overnight, it's gone.
Yeah, and how much of the $500 million or what they had reached had been invested in that company that Curtis Pope was now saying, sign these documents, you're out?
I think at the time there was, in terms of profits and everything, there was around $50 million in there or thereabouts, which
doesn't seem like a lot compared to $500 million.
No, but that was the money that was missing in the end.
Right.
And I believe to this day a lot of that money is still missing. So who knows where it is right now? But that's
I don't know why you're looking at me when you say that. I invite you on the show. I'm trying to sell some books. But I want to make sure I get to all the questions that folks were kind enough to write into us. And the MacBook Pro says, go fuck yourself. Up, there we go. Okay, so my first question, by the time I got to page 20, I read this book faster, I was telling you, than I've read any book, and I read a lot of it on my iPhone. That's how devoted. I don't think I've ever read more than an article of news on my iPhone. But I was stuck on this flight with no Wi-Fi, and before I got on the flight, I said and I forgot my damn iPad, which would offer me a bigger page.
Yeah.
So I read maybe the first 100 pages of a 300 and something page book on my tiny little iPhone. And for these aging eyes, I want to tell you that was a hell of an experience. But I ripped through this thing in less than 36 hours. It's an extraordinary read. But by page 15, I'm thinking, how do I get the rights to make this into a major motion picture? Because it is the stuff of what cinema dreams are made of. And I found out, sadly, for my own selfish interest, that Hollywood had already sort of scooped you and this book up. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well,
I mean, it's all in the early stages.
Very, very early
But you've got
stages.
yourself show business representation.
Yeah, which is always nice to say. It's what you dream about when you start writing these books, is to have Hollywood knocking at your door. And I don't think they're banging the door down yet, but there is some interest. My literary agent in London has a link up with Hollywood agency, who they worked with Jack Reacher with Tom Cruise on. And my literary agent sent the book across to my agent Steve Fisher at APA in the summer. And I was actually at the World Series of Poker, where I saw you this summer. And
yeah, what page is it that I appear on?
I was actually hoping you blew the story, because I was actually hoping you were going to win the whole thing, and then that would have been a chapter in itself. That would have been phenomenal.
Yeah, sorry to let you down.
Yeah, that would have really made it.
I felt wildly shy. Yeah, so I'm reading the book, and you're talking about walking through the casino floor, specifically the Amazon Orange room at the main event. And I'm thinking to myself, as I'm reading it, oh, I was in the Amazon room. And then in the next sentence you write, and I walked past movie star Kevin Pollak.
He was like, oh, that's that British guy who kept harassing me.
Does he know that I'm going to invite him onto the chat show? Is this all a big setup? And then you spent some time with Greg Merson, who of course won that year.
Yeah.
Who his story, which you touch upon, is pretty spectacular, and I thought you paid tremendous respect in regard to his journey in the book as well. It goes off in a lot of different directions. The whole story is not just about Daniel Tzvetkoff, but it is truly a spectacular piece of work, and show business should be knocking. The agents are telling you that meetings are being set up. They're getting it in the hands of filmmakers, and they're pitching you ideas for directors. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, at the moment. It's all very, very early stages, but obviously, Runner has just come out, an online poker movie in itself, so...
Right. Well, you're very fortunate, because that film could not have been worse.
It's actually a shame, I read the script in the summer, and the script was really good. I enjoyed the script, and I thought, when you get Ben Affleck and people like that in it, of that standard, this has potential to be brilliant and up there with Rounders. And then when I saw the movie, they edited out such like huge chunks of the script, which actually explained character motivation or were quite dramatic and raised the stakes.
Yeah, we specialize in that here in America, storytelling.
Oh, it's just such a shame. It was,
Yeah.
the writing was great.
The studio system at some point must have got a hold of it because they have a savant level of genius on finding the epicenter of why it's special and then adding water directly to that.
Well, I read Ben Affleck.
Point.
I don't know if this is true or not. It was in the newspapers. He actually hired his own editor to try and to save the movie. So I don't know what it would have looked like before he did that.
Right.
It was okay. Runner was okay, but it could have been a lot better than it actually was. And unfortunately, it didn't get great reviews. And
Yeah, when I say it was a disaster, I don't mean to suggest for a nanosecond that I saw it.
oh, you actually haven't seen it?
Oh, God, no.
It's worth a watch if you like online poker. Definitely worth a watch. But
Do you have to squint when Justin Timberlake's on screen?
I like Timberlake. I'm
Okay.
a big fan of Timberlake.
All right.
I was looking forward to seeing him in it. Actually, I thought he was perfect for the role which I read in the script.
Well, it's not fair, but I've been setting you up. We have him now via Skype
Good job. I said I liked him.
from Japan. Justin? Justin? Did we lose the connection? Kenny? Justin Timberlake, go. Justin. Weird. Seemed like I got the go-ahead on the monitor here saying we were ready to patch him through. Fuck, I'm embarrassed. I'm sorry.
You got me looking at the screen just in case anyway, yeah.
Well, I really do wish you tremendous success with it, and you've already started work on your next book. I saw a tweet that there was some breaking news or something regarding the subject. Are you free at all to talk a little bit about that?
Can't go into too much detail yet. 'Cause we're
Good,
just
good.
getting-
We like that sort of teasing.
Yeah, we're just like talking it over and getting to the point with contracts and what have you, but it's completely different to Alligator Blood, because Alligator Blood is a very big, brash, Vegas-style type of book, and this book is very gritty and as far away as the poker world as you can imagine, but it's just a phenomenal, heartbreaking story with just a terrible miscarriage of justice at the end. And as I said on Twitter, the subject of the book, after 15 years in jail, was actually had a parole hearing this week, and she's just waiting to hear now if it's gone through.
Right.
So fingers crossed, because the story's just heartbreaking. It's something I would be really excited to write about.
And the belief is that the angle, anyways, is wrongfully accused and 15 years already.
I don't know if
Served.
not so much wrongfully accused, just someone who didn't steal anything, didn't hurt anyone, didn't murder anyone, is 16 years old with no prior convictions from a really tough background, gets given a 40-year jail sentence, which is just like more than a lot of murderers, some murderers get. And she served 15 years already, which is 15 years too long.
Yeah, for a 16-year-old starting out.
Um,
There's a moment in the book where Daniel's talking about possibly looking at 75-year sentence, when at some point he's in a cell with someone who's there for 25 years accused of murder, I think, or convicted of murder.
It was actually, that story's crazy in itself. He's in a cell with a guy called Albert Gonzalez, and Albert is actually convicted of the record credit card fraud in the United States.
Oh, that's what it was, right.
Yeah. And his story was actually on American Greed.
Yeah.
And it's a great episode. And basically, Daniel was facing 75 years in jail if he didn't turn informant. And Albert had already turned informant 10 years before and messed that up. And now he's facing 20 years in jail again. And he basically said to Daniel, you got a family to think about.
Yeah.
Do what you got to do to get out of here, raise your family, and don't look back.
It was incredibly helpful and, if not extraordinary, that they ended up running into each other, because it seemed to be a real turning point for Daniel in terms of seeing further down the tracks.
Oh, it's crazy. When someone mentioned that he was in a cell with this guy, Albert Gonzalez, and you start Googling Albert and getting to the bottom of his story, you think, wow, these two guys in the same cell together. What are the odds on that? They both got Hollywood stories.
Yeah. Well, it'll be a great moment in the movie. I can't wait to see it.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. All right, well, follow James at JamesL1927 on the Twitter. Alligator Blood, the name of the book, referring to an Australian term meaning, well, the Jews would call it chutzpah, but to a level of balls, people. nerve, moxie, what have you, this kid was filled with much more than piss and vinegar, I can assure you of that.
But mostly vinegar.
But mostly vinegar.
It's a Grandpa Simpson. Sorry.
Grandpa Simpson, always the best quotes from Grandpa. Was that the original sleep take, by the way, Grandpa Simpson?
I'm sure he's not the first.
Oh. Is there anything else the worst question I've ever been asked in an interview, I just realized I stopped myself from asking, is when at the end of the interview they say, was there anything at all you wanted to add that we hadn't discussed? No, you fell shy of doing your job. You talked to me long enough. If you can't think of anything else to ask me, get me the fuck out of here.
Well, just that hopefully we'll have US publication in the new year. It's out now in the UK and Australia. Bizarrely, it's not out in the US yet. When it's all set in the United States, most of it, and it's about the collapse of online poker in America.
Yeah.
So a bit bizarre, but hopefully we'll have some news soon on a date.
Well, what would be the possible hang-up if Simon & Schuster UK must somehow be related to Simon & Schuster US?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
It beats me. It's just the publishing world is crazy sometimes, and you think this would be released first in the US or at the same time. But it's a mystery, but fingers crossed it will be out soon.
All right, so who's the model on the back? Because that doesn't look anything. It looks more like you.
Yeah, I wish
Daniel.
I actually asked my publisher to say underneath that was me and not Daniel, because now some people might think it's Daniel, and I'm probably going to get hunted down by angry poker players.
Yeah, because you've got the picture of you, and then right across the top it's got his name.
Yeah.
One would easily be led astray.
Actually,
That also from Reservoir Dogs.
that was the idea. Yeah, one of my favourite movies actually.
And your favorite movie of mine?
Ooh, that is a tough one.
Not really.
No,
There are not that many to choose from.
oh, there's some classics in there.
Oh, please.
Well,
Now you're just
Usual Suspects.
stop.
Yeah, Usual Suspects, Few Good Men.
Why? This is so unnecessary.
Could go on and on.
Now, you said you've seen this show in the past.
Yeah.
I would venture to say you've not made it to the end of one of these shows, because now it's time for you to lay a little improvisational comedy on us, whether you're
One
prepared
of my strong points.
or
Great.
not. I know with your solicitor background, this should be what would you call, what would be the UK version of piece of cake? Do you have a,
Piece of cake. I think that's.
is that it?
Yeah.
Is that it? All right. Well, it's not the only thing you
Got a
take.
piece of piss.
Piece of piss?
There we go. That's what I
Oh,
like it.
lovely. How does one acquire a piece of piss? All right, so this is your camera. When you're ready, your task that lies ahead of you is to play the Larry King game. The Larry King game, not too familiar with your folks and friends back home. Are you familiar at all with Larry King? Please say no, because that'd be awesome.
Not really.
Perfect.
I'm kind of. I know who he is. I've kind of seen bits and pieces of him on TV, but he's non-existent back home.
Well, he has a thing, of course he isn't. And he just turned 80. Well, he turns 80 on Tuesday, but he just had his big 80th birthday party. So he's a dinosaur. He was around when fire was invented. And he had a long-running show, of course, on CNN here in the States.
Yep.
And he did these one-on-one interviews. And he would go to the phones, and he would talk live to people calling in, because he had started as a radio show 100 years ago. So it's this moment where Larry, would, right before going to the phones, would look into the camera and share something about himself that no one, I promise you, no one wanted to know. It is that beautiful, wonderful, useless piece of information that I need you
Oh God.
to make up in the guise of Larry King. So, your task. I want a bad Larry King impression. No problem there, because you have no idea how to
Don't
do a
even know
good
how he
one.
sounds.
Exactly. Which is perfect, because everyone who sat before you who did know what he sounded made damn sure they sounded nothing like him.
Great. Okay.
So it could be in any falsetto, any voice, any tenor you want. And then as Larry, you'll look in the camera and share something about him, not you, you're Larry, that no one wants to know. And then you can end it by going to the phone and calling a city or taking a call from a city somewhere near Cardiff you know, if it's funny sounding town, it will help to be a little button of the bit. Do you want to hear the prototype? You're going to bore the crew here to death for me to do it again, but you seem like you may be in service of it.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay, the
Yeah.
prototype. Again, bad Larry King impression, useless information about himself, go to the phones.
Okay.
Thanksgiving. I like to teabag the gravy boats before the guests arrive. Schenectady, hello. That's all there is to it. Now, any voice, anything about
God,
Larry?
my friends back home are going to have a field day on
That's
this.
the only reason we got
Yeah.
a chat room message asking me to make sure you did this.
Great.
Must have been one of your friends.
Oh, okay.
There's your camera
This
when
is
you're
not
ready.
my strong point
Oh,
either.
everyone knows that. No pressure. There's no way to fuck this up. We've had worse.
Okay. On the subject of American freedom, I had my own sense of freedom this weekend. The wife was away, and I decided to spend the whole weekend in the nude. I mowed the lawn in the nude. I felt the breeze on my balls. But you know what was very comforting? Was wearing sports socks pulled up over my knees while in the nude. I would recommend it to anyone. Anyway, talking about freedom, we go direct to Landvolpa, Gwyneth, Colgaris, Cantosilio, go, go, go.
Yes! Way to bring it home, superstar. Come on!
Oh, God.
And you actually affected an American voice.
That's the only voice I know how to
to
do.
boot. All right, you win your very own copy of my book. There we go. I sign
Thank
that
you.
to you, sir. Thank you for signing this one to
Fantastic.
me. It's a wonderful exchange. I can't thank you enough. It's exciting for us to, dare I say, break an author here in the States that a lot of people are not familiar with and should be, and hopefully will be in the new year. And thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for having me on. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah. Sit there uncomfortably if you wouldn't mind for the next 90 seconds while I wrap things up for the folks at home. James Leighton, everyone, from Cardiff in the UK. Again, the train derailed in Manchester and 3 people died. They always go down at the end. Speaking of going down at the end, our own Dr. Kenny Chen. I want to thank you for being here this afternoon. What? That doesn't make any sense. Jamie's sitting in for Sam Levine.
I'm here
Also
normally.
makes no sense. Samantha Ward, Makeup to the Stars. Josh and J-Mac running the entire shuttle from the outer reaches. And Danielle Oberlin, I mentioned, our media maven, keeping you abuzz with all the keywords. Our next guest coming up, no fucking clue. But with the holidays coming up, it was questionable which and what dates. But it looks like Sunday, December 1st, we may in fact be streaming live. Follow me on the Twitter, at Kevin Pollak, and I will keep you abreast. And also Danielle Oberlin will keep you abreast. Through the Facebook and every